Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to episode 119 of Sword of Spirit, Sermonator. So we've taken a long course, and we'll conclude for now, the issue of inheritance probably today. It's been a long journey, and we're in the throes of the end of that journey. Where all things will be eventually reconciled. And things are happening rather quickly in the world. As I said, more than a few times, there are indicators of the difficulty that we're facing going forward. And they're similar to things that we've seen, but only seen them in history in other countries and other parts of the world. And right now we're in a whole-scale attempt to take over the United States, as well as Israel. And there are two focal points, except the United States will be removed from that particular endeavor going forward. And I'll tell you why. When we study, we see, and some people get confused, there are some areas in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that indicate clearly, and everything that we've read indicates clearly that there's going to be a mess out here, especially in the Middle East. The United States is going to be essentially neutered in that position. They're not going to be able to, nor will they be participating on that world scene for much longer. We'll have to clean up our own house. But no one is going to get the opportunity to take any glory from God in helping and saving Israel. However, during that process, Israel is not well, first of all, they have their own guilt. All right. Remember what Jesus said. He said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem," as he wept, "how I long to gather thee, but you will not see me again, physically see me again, until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." We know that happens at least 3 times a year on the pilgrimage feasts, which include Passover, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, and Sukkot, which is the birth of the Messiah, and the indication of his first coming as well as his second coming. And this inheritance battle rages on today in the Middle East, and what it takes, the glow, however, is all centered around the physical world, all right? Israel themselves will have their punishment just like everyone else, and no one is immune, and God is fair. Okay? You can be his chosen, but if you mess up, he's going to choose to chastise you as well. And that's our lot. But anyway, just going back now, we take this look, and last week we indicated how he appeared to John. His hair was white like wool and snow, and his eyes were flames of fire. He goes on to explain more and more about what his vision was. He says his countenance was like the sun that shines in strength when I saw him. He says, I fell dead at his feet, which means he laid down and worshiped in awe when he saw him. And then he said, fear not, for I am the ineffable name of God, the first and the last. I am the I am. He that lives and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys to the kingdom and the keys to hell and death. So he says to John, he says, I want you to write all these things down. I want to show them. I want you to elaborate on them. So the unique part about the book of Revelation, even in the beginning, is that the revelator, and not John, the Lord that's revealing it to him, okay, is speaking of both the present and the future. And because of that, it makes it highly prophetic. We talked about the mystery of the 7 stars that he saw in the right hand, the 7 candlesticks, and those are the churches. So we'll pick up in that area right now, where we kind of left off last week, I'm sorry. Notice this. It says that all of these things were the churches in Asia Minor. Now, I've said this numerous times, but it's got to sink in because of what's happening on the world scene today. All 7 of those churches, Asia Minor, in fact, is the territory and the country that we know as Turkey or Turkiya. Now, they have changed the name to be more Islamic or Arabic. So of those churches that we've read in the beginning in Revelation, we have the church of Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, all in Turkey. Very, very significant. Why? Well, because Turkey is predominantly where, you ready for this? Esau and Ishmael's progeny and family and legacy wound up. They took the long route. Ishmael and Hagar took the long route through Saudi Arabia, but their children and the offspring of both Esau and Ishmael migrated north into what we now know as Turkey. Hagar, Ishmael's mother, the maidservant. The name Hagar means sojourner, i.e. a wanderer, a traveler. And so was her son, obviously, and there were other sons. And then we saw how Esau married his cousin Ishmael's daughter, along with the 5 or 6 other Canaanite and pagan women that he married. So you see that name that we tie to Jacob or Yaakov, all right, James essentially in our English language today or Latin, means supplanter, but it also means restrainer. And as I explained, the church in general calls Jacob the supplanter, and that has a negative connotation, right? He didn't technically supplant his brother. His brother gave up for a bowl of lentils. Nothing wrong with lentil soup now, but that's what he did. He gave up his entire inheritance because that's what he was. He had no concern or care for the kingdom. Okay, relating this today in the physical and into the spiritual. What do we chase? Do we chase a bowl of lentils? Our sustenance, a meager sustenance, but the point is, it is symbolic, all right, of taking care of our own physical needs and eliminating the rest, not even bothering and going our way. Well, that was Esau's character. However, Jacob's character was not that. Jacob's character was to restrain Esau from destroying, because the other meaning of the word Yaakov or Jacob is restrainer, and he held him on his heel. So he didn't prevent him, he restrained him from destroying everything that Isaac, the son of Abraham, the child of promise, the bloodline to the Messiah, all right? It wasn't just Isaac's estate, because they were both wealthy. When Esau went north and moved away, it's because they couldn't fit all their wealth in the same neighborhood, so to speak. So they had to stake out other territories and lands to be able to spread out. But Esau was Esau, and we know what the promise is for him and the Edomites in time. They will be wiped out, because Esau was not only being restrained by Jacob, he would have destroyed the entire estate. But more importantly, if Esau had been in charge, let's say, and that hadn't happened, and he married all these pagan women, what purity would the bloodline of the Messiah? It would have been destroyed. So again, even in its subtlety, it started out very subtle, as most takeovers do. All right, very subtle. You implant into people's minds something, and it festers like a wound, and it's remembered, and then ultimately it's acted upon. But it all starts subtly, just like it started in the world, okay? Just like it started in the world, just like it started here in this country. It was subtle. but now it's not. And that's what happened here. It's not that Esau and Jacob hated one another. And by the way, the word hate biblically means to love less than, okay, in its Aramaic and Hebrew. But there was that tension that I'm going to get you, I'm going to get this back. And it's persisted today, thousands of years later. We're in the throes of this same attempt to recapture past glory and to take the kingdom away from its rightful bloodline. It's no different than what Athaliah, Jezebel's daughter, did to her own family. What mother, especially a queen, with no king, by the way, so she was unfettered except by the court, who took Joash, her youngest son, and hid him and made him king at the age of 7. And she lost her mind. Why? Because her job was worse than her mother's. Her job was to wipe out any possibility. Now, whether she was aware of that or not, we don't know. But what mother kills all of her children? I mean, it was pretty clear that as a regnant queen, regnant means that she was serving or how you say, on the throne by herself. She was on the throne, right? She had no king, no husband. Her mother's name means without cohabitation. But it was the daughter, once again, through a bloodline to destroy another bloodline, one that was ordained by God. And that's why Joash, whose name means God hath made himself a man, that can be taken two ways. God made a man, God made himself a man. How interesting is that? That's some of the double meanings in Hebrew and Aramaic words. And she tried to destroy that, as we've said over and over and over again, because it is imperative that we understand this. Almost none of the theological positions out there talk about these things or discuss these things at all, okay? They're off in a different direction. One that doesn't exactly focus on the whys and wherefores of Jerusalem, which this is what this is all about. Remember, in the very heart of Jerusalem, which sits in the very heart of Israel, which in the temple sits right in the middle, right? And within the temple was the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, and inside the Ark of the Covenant were three things. The manna that fed the Israelites, the bread of life is what it was from heaven, okay? See the symbolism. And these are real occurrences. And the rod of Aaron, which was the authority and the ability to do miracles in God's name, but the authority, the staff was the authority, just like the shepherd has the staff with his sheep. Moses had a staff for 2 million people or more. And what was else? The tablets of the law. The basic essence of God's word to mankind, do these things, the corporate law. So everything is right in the center. Everything is in the center. Jerusalem is the center of all these things. Remember what the word Jerusalem means, or Jerusalema, all right? It means God will provide himself a lamb. Again, a double entendre there. God will provide himself a lamb, or God will provide himself, meaning he will provide the lamb for an offering. Where? In Solima, or Salem, the city of peace. City of peace, not the city of war, which is what the world sees today. I told you, and this is critical to understand, don't blow this off. When anti-Semitism is on the rise in the world is poised for war, world war. Now, the unconscionable thing about that is that in the United States alone, and I've said this, and I'll continue to say it till it sinks in, anti-Semitism is up. That means that includes the church, okay? It's up 388% presently. How in the heck can anything be up 388% and not be noticeable? I think you can see the landscape. Well, anyway, We know that in Turkey, they traversed this whole area and they migrated into Turkey. That's very, very, very important. It's very critical to our understanding of what's going on here today because, once again, we go through the churches. We're going to zoom in on some of the things in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which talk about a great invasion. Unfortunately, Orthodox Christianity today believes that Ezekiel 38 and 39 are what's coming now, but that's not true. If we read Scripture for what it is and what it's worth, okay, which is everything, we can see that that is a post-millennial affair. Now, Israel has always been surrounded by enemies. Israel and the last generation kicked off not in 1948 when the state was established. And the United States, by the way, was the last vote on that, and we voted them as a nation. But rather in 1967, 19 years later, when they were surrounded by all the nations in the Middle East and attacked in the Six-Day War called the Yom Kippur War. Remember, as we said, and even as had happened this past year on October 7th when Israel was invaded by Hamas, they're surrounded by nations that want to destroy them for a number of reasons. The first and foremost of which is the destruction of any bloodline, or now, even after the first coming of the Messiah, no need for a second one. If they could wipe out Israel, they wouldn't have to worry about it. That's how they think. But it's very distorted, obviously. So Ezekiel 38 and 39 presents some very, more than very dynamic issues about the types of invasion. And we'll talk a little bit about it as we go the rest of the way today. All right, so in the last days of the Middle East, in Ezekiel it mentions Gog and Magog and Meshech and Tubal, all right, and all of these other places that have been misidentified in typical writings on prophecy. They claim that those are in Russia, and this is here and that, and the Russians and the Confederation, and the revived Roman Empire, which we've settled that one with the three cities with the mountains and hills. So it has taken end-time prophecy and understanding on such a diverse and crooked path, all right, that it's our job to unravel it, okay, and really get what the word says. So Magog, Meshach, Tubal, all those places, for the last 50-something years ago, it's been wrong because no one has ever said they, like the churches in Revelation, are all in Turkey. It's all there. Now, Turkey, I've mentioned this, a long-time trusted member of NATO, all right, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, for those that may not know what it stands for, which is a confederation of nations sworn to protect one another in the event of aggression by another country against a NATO member. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, all right? And there's consequences of good intentions. The consequence of this one with NATO is that the United States had to foot the bill for everything and protect everybody. You ever see a picture of an eagle feeding its little babies in a nest? All they are is like their mouths open, feed me, mommy, feed me, feed me, Seymour, whatever. And they do nothing. They contribute nothing, which is what the turmoil that was caused in 2017 and 2018 when the President of the United States declared finally that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. Live with it. And the trouble began to mount even further. The attacks here in the United States on him and our government and other people in the country, as well as the attacks and the rise of anti-Semitism, doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen overnight. What happens is it grows exponentially. 388% in America alone. That's unconscionable, right? The United States of America houses as many or more Jewish people than the rest of the world. How do you figure this? Evil has no boundaries. Prophecy is always correct, and it's all here. But we have to decipher and unravel the nonsense that where these places are and who these people are. It's all there. Just like I said when we talked about the two beasts in Revelation, which we'll get back to another time. One is, it says, in the waters, the sea. That means the nations. The waters and the seas and the oceans represent the nations of the world. When he says, and the other beast was from the land, the only land that anyone was concerned of back then, including particularly John of Patmos, was the land in the Middle East. Okay. Let's get that established. So now, I've mentioned this as well. Turkey was a very trusted member of NATO. Budgets were put together, security assistance budgets where NATO, not even NATO, but 3 countries garnered all of that budget for 55 years. And those 3 countries were Turkey, Egypt, and Israel. Okay? Turkey has fallen off the map because a year ago they chose to break the NATO pattern and go and do warfare exercises and training exercises with the Russians. That was forbidden. So their status as a preferred nation went from the top 3 funded, where you can't even find Turkey's name in the top 25 anymore. So that was very subtle. But, you know, being inside a little bit, you have to know some of these things. And their president, Erdogan, has been trying to reestablish the Sharia Caliphate, the 10th Caliphate. Okay, remember it says there's a 10-horned beast. Those are 10 nations. 10 nations that surround Israel, that will be a confederation of nations that will take arms against Israel. And it's such an overwhelming force that we would look at it and say Israel has no chance. Well, they have a chance, except we're not going to be helping them. God's not going to allow the United States or anybody else to capture any glory for his saving of Israel. God's been the only one that has saved Israel throughout history. And that's what's going to happen again. Now, Erdogan, as we've said, trying to establish this caliphate, because the last caliphate ended with the head wound, the traditional head wound of the leader in Revelation. People think that somebody's going to get shot in the head, they're going to recover, and they're going to be like a John Travolta movie where he has these revelations and he's brilliant. Come to find out it was a tumor in his head all the time. He's trying to reestablish that caliphate, that head. A head mentioned biblically and particularly in the Middle East means a head of state. The caliphate was thrown out of Jerusalem. It was Turkey. The caliphate was thrown out by the Brits in 1922. Now, back in the 6th and 7th centuries, it was disestablished, this whole issue. But it's on the rise again with Erdogan in Turkey, because he is a proponent of the previous murderous caliph, Selim I. And he's using the same rhetoric, saying the same things, just like we've caught some of our politicians pretending to have speeches, and all they're doing is plagiarizing speeches of other people. The ungreat quoting the great and claiming it for themselves, the plagiarism. All right, it's the same thing, it's rhetoric. And this rhetoric of Selim is essentially a total jihad and a reestablishment of the Ottoman Empire under Sharia law. Sharia law means, in Islam, glory to whoever they're dealing with, and the rest of the world is heathens, cut their heads off and kill them. Plain and simple. Who are they aligned with today? I can tell you that in the past, and I'm sure I mentioned this earlier times, it bears mentioning that this preferred member status that we talked about of Turkey was a lot of money financing them to build up their country and their military. If you think that Turkey is a bunch of sand out in the desert, go look up a couple pictures of Istanbul. The streets are literally paved with gold. All right? However, that is now a thing of the past. They've aligned themselves with an enemy, and they did the unthinkable. And you have to discern and be able to decipher pretty quickly. Because when we look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, we take a look at the warnings to these churches that God gave to John. He warned them and told them what was coming, what was happening. He gave them commendations, and he condemned their bad behavior, which is what we need to do individually every day, as well as the church at large. And believe me, the church today is as anti-Semitic as any place else in the world, and that, my friends, is a huge problem. How can you be anti-Semitic, which means anti-Messiah, by virtue of its normal meaning, and claim to be godly? Beats the heck out of me. God gave this information to John. He spoke to the prophets, the messengers of those churches. And God said to John, you got to warn them about what's going on. And there was one particular church in here that we're going to talk about. It's going to be explosive when we get through it. And how far along are we in this whole process? And we're very far along. Very far along. Something happened about 2 weeks ago that has now drawn Turkey into this configuration of nations that will go against Israel. And that is that they arrested 33 people. Well, they detained them. And released, detained could mean indicted, imprisoned, and everything else. 33 people that they claim were Israeli spies. There's been nothing more about it to review in the news, but the fact that it happened gives now Turkey an excuse or a catalyst to say, you know what? I'm going to go join my pals, Russia, China, and Iran, in surrounding Israel. And Turkey's a very powerful nation, by the way, because they have similar weapons to what we do. In fact, we've sold them stuff, like the Russians and everybody else. So if anybody thinks that these guys are still just, wandering around in the desert, herding camels or sheep or whatever, go pull up a couple of pictures of what the Middle East looks like right now. You'll be amazed. Your jaw will drop. Go take a look at Istanbul. Go look at St. Petersburg in Russia. If you think that these countries are poor, I got news for you. And I'm not saying that the people aren't poor and abused, but the people running these places, wealthy beyond belief. Kind of similar to how do politicians in the United States making a maximum of $175,000 a year, which is great money, but it ain't big money. How do they wind up with $8 million mansions on 2 coasts and all this other stuff? How does that happen? Don't tell me it's because of their book sales. Baloney. It's all crooked. And it's crooked all over the world. And that is why this is coming down so fast, so hard. Well, anyway, I will let you know. We're going to conclude on that, but there will be mention of the inheritance over time and throughout, because it is the governor, like a ship's governor, it guides where the ship's going to, that you just turn it a little bit, the rudder, all right, and it's like a governor. It directs where the ship will go. Right now, the ship's fallen off the edge of the earth, if there was such a thing. And we have to get a hold of that and understand it, because it's not going to stop. There's nothing we can do to stop it. But we need to pray through it. We need to be on the right side of history. We need to be right on the right side of the biblical prophecy without all the false information. It's all that false information that causes the people in 2 Thessalonians to, quote unquote, a great falling away. The only people that are going to fall away are believers, people that claim to be Christians, when they find out that all of this stuff that they put their faith in, all these prophecy gurus, instead of the word itself and digging in by themselves and studying it the way we do here, all of us, all right, they'll lead them to hell in a handbasket. And it's coming fast. Get right. I will tell you this, I am in the throes. Keep me in your prayers. I've been directed that I have to write this book on Revelation, and that starts right away. I've been organizing it and all that stuff, so hopefully keep me in your prayers, and that will happen. And we'll just continue on in our path. Next week, I believe we'll be studying out of the book of Acts, all right? And we'll just start our journey there and continue as we've gone. Until that time, God bless you both all. Love you, and see you next week.